You're listening to episode 1 of Present Moment. Welcome to Present Moment, Mindfulness, Practice, and Science. I'm Ted Meissner. Present Moment is a podcast with interviews, conversations, and roundtable discussions. We speak with mindfulness researchers about their newest findings published in peer-reviewed science journals, teachers about their understanding and methods as they work with students of mindfulness, authors about their books and interests, and we also speak with everyday practitioners. The website presentmomentmindfulness.com has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Dr. J. David Creswell speaks with us about his work as director of the Health and Human Performance Lab at Carnegie Mellon. As the practice of mindfulness becomes more mainstream in contemporary society, the need for innovative and rigorous research about it becomes all the more important. Good questions arise about the validity of findings in mindfulness studies, so having more structured controls with a portfolio of indicators is crucial. Self-report, biological markers, and neurological evidence can complement one another and provide a more comprehensive understanding of how attending to the present moment with openness can result in the benefits we see. Dr. J. David Creswell's research focuses broadly on how the mind and brain influence our physical health and performance. Much of his work examines basic questions about stress and coping, and an understanding how these factors can be modulated through stress reduction interventions. In one line of research, he is examining the stress pathways linking mindfulness meditation with improved health outcomes, and an understanding how the capacity to be mindful of one's moment-to-moment experiences can improve adaptive responding. In a second line of research, Dr. Creswell is examining how self-affirmation reduces stress and quiets ego responding. These areas of work aim to explore the underlying psychological mechanisms by which people can adaptively cope with adversity and flourish in life's pursuits. Our guest today is Dr. J. David Creswell. David, welcome to Present Moment.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So tell us about your background. How did you first encounter mindfulness?
Well, I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska. Probably not a hotbed for mindfulness meditation practice or research. But interestingly, there is a fairly well-known Zen meditation center in Omaha, and they had some sort of outshoots. There's a practice group, a Zen group in Lincoln. And I remember taking a high school psychology class and being really interested, and a class on Buddhism, and being really just sort of captivated by this topic. And so as part of the psychology class, they said, we want you to do a little project. So I went to this meditation group, got to sit with them and sort of try it out. And then as part of this project, I strapped on a heart rate monitor to one of the more experienced Zen meditators there. And so I think my kind of scientific interest for this practice was sparked fairly early. I do remember finding that during meditation, his heart rate dropped something like 15 beats per minute. As a young scientist, I remember being so disappointed. I think I had some idea that I thought, his heart rate would stop or something during meditation practice. But nonetheless, the phenomenon really was something that was of interest to me, both in terms of this experience of practicing and cultivating well-being and health over time through meditation, but then also the kind of puzzle by which, how is it that this practice of sitting there and paying attention on purpose, moment by moment, could translate into these, wide-ranging well-being and health benefits? It just seemed like a fascinating puzzle. So I then, I think after college, I did a number of meditation retreats, probably most prominently among those was to go spend some time at Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery, Plum Village in France, and just got to really see this kind of living mindfulness practice that people were really developing there, and how much that seemed to really transform people. And so it just kind of became, a fascination. So when I started graduate school, I was, getting my PhD in psychology and health psychology, and I asked my advisor, can I study this? And this was around 2001, and so it was a little bit before this kind of outpouring of great scientific research. And so he actually, I think in a prescient way, said, yes, this can be done as long as it's done in a rigorous way. And so that kind of launched me on doing some of the science around mindfulness meditation training. So I don't know. I've had a kind of a long, interesting history with it, and I continue to practice and see it as something that's valuable. My curiosity about how it works is undiminished. If anything, the more work we do, the more I think the more interesting, and there's more sort of puzzles to unravel with how this is working.
It's interesting. You're the first researcher that I've spoken with who's said that when they wanted to pursue this as an area of interest and expertise in their research, were encouraged by it, and were encouraged by it with rigor. Usually people are saying, oh, no, don't go into that. That's weird stuff. So it's nice to hear that there was actually some encouragement for you to pursue this.
Yeah, there was. It was a guy named Hector Myers. He was ended up being my PhD advisor at UCLA, and he had been doing transcendental meditation work, looking at how transcendental meditation could reduce blood pressure in hypertensives, so people with high blood pressure, and he. I think he sort of saw that there was this kind of changing tide, and there were these opportunities, and also that from his own research background, it's seen that it had these health benefits in terms of changing blood pressure. So he was very supportive, and I probably lucked out in terms of finding the right person at the right time.
So tell us about your work as director of the Health and Human Performance Lab at Carnegie Mellon. What does the lab focus on?
Well, I think broadly what our lab does is focus on what makes people resilient under stress. There's some surprising data starting to come out showing that stress levels seem to be on the rise. So, in fact, when you ask people how stressed they are over the past month, we now have these large nationally representative samples that are completing these measures, and we have it going all the way back to the early 80s. And if you look at some of this data, it's interesting. You actually see these sort of steady rises over time in stress levels. And it doesn't seem to be attributed to specific economic factors, but it does seem to be present. And so, we're faced with questions as a society about how we want to manage these stress burdens in this more complicated, fast-paced world that we live in. And so a broad interest of mine is trying to both understand what are some kind of factors people have within them that make them naturally resilient, and then also how can stress resilience be trained and fostered. And so that's where meditation fits in there. I've a lot of my training was in stress and coping, so I'm interested broadly in I guess a broad range of stress management strategies, and I think where my interests really lie are trying to understand what does that look like, what is that doing to the brain, to our coping and behavior, and to our physiology and health over time.
There's several papers on the lab site, and we'll have a link to that on the episode page for this episode. In the work you've been doing, what's been the most interesting to you personally? What's really stood out?
Yeah, it's hard to reduce it to one area. I always feel like the current paper that I'm working on is probably the most interesting. There's been a couple of challenges that the field of mindfulness science or contemplative science has faced in terms of really moving this work forward and making it palatable to a broader scientific audience and to really use some methodological rigor. So, to use active treatment comparison groups rather than just waitlist controls. What do I mean by that? That we're actually comparing mindfulness meditation training to other types of training that people might be able to get and really see, are there kind of comparative advantages or kind of differential effects across these different kind of modes of training. And the reason why that's important is that people raise lots of alternative explanations for our findings. They say, okay, well, you're showing that mindfulness meditation training is improving some health outcome relative to getting no treatment. But they say, maybe it's not anything to do with meditation at all. In fact, it's just these non-specific factors like hanging out with a group and learning meditation in this new group, and that group provides social support. Or they might say, this is all just a big placebo effect, namely that people have positive treatment expectancies after doing all this hard meditation work. And it's really those positive expectations that are driving these effects as to anything specific to the meditation practice. So, there's these problems with, increasing, I think, our methodological rigor with meditation studies. And so what I did was kind of go out on a limb to actually develop a very rigorous meditation randomized control trial approach. So what we did was we actually took the 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction program. This is a commonly used 8-week mindfulness meditation training program. And we brought that into a retreat setting. So in this case, now it was all within a 3-day retreat format. And critically, we then created a matched program that could be delivered at the exact same time that had all of the same elements of this 3-day mindfulness meditation training program without the mindfulness component. So in this case, what we did was we recruited stressed, unemployed adults. We invited them to this retreat center. When they arrived at the retreat center, we took some measures. Then we randomly assigned them to either participate in the intensive 3-day mindfulness meditation program, where you're learning activities like the body scan, paying attention to body experiences moment by moment with awareness and receptivity. But by contrast, we had this exactly, I think, structurally equivalent comparison program where participants were doing guided relaxation exercises. So they might be laying down and doing somewhat, kind of body awareness exercises, but we gave them instructions like, participate in this activity, but if, you start to get drowsy, just go with it. The key here is just to be relaxed. So the critical component here was really manipulating the mindfulness training. In one condition, in our mindfulness group, they're starting to attend and really be more receptive to those experiences. In the relaxation group, they're just kind of doing this more comfortable, kind of mind-wandering relaxation exercise. So we really wanted to manipulate this mindfulness training program. And so I think we did a good job. Folks really liked both programs, which I think was important. We had similar kind of expectancies for positive treatment expectancies. We also had similar levels of feeling social support and group support in the context of this program. But what we did find was that these types of programs seem to differentiate folks in terms of their long-term health. So we found that these unemployed folks at 4-month follow-up who'd gotten the mindfulness meditation training program showed reduced levels of inflammation. We know that inflammation seems to be elevated among the unemployed. So some initial indication that mindfulness meditation training may be reducing inflammation. But then we also, I think, did a very rigorous set of measures, including brain measures, looking at how this meditation training program, just 3 days, granted pretty intense 3 days, could really change brain structure and function. And there's some initial indications there that we seem to be rewiring the brain in ways where these meditation trained folks had more connectivity with these kind of prefrontal regulatory regions of the brain that we think may be critical for fostering resilience under stress.
Yeah, the particular thing I liked about this study, and I remember your presentation on it, was first and foremost the two different programs Him and her. Do you want to tell what those stand for?
Him and her. Him is HEM, that's health enhancement through mindfulness. And the her program was the health enhancement through relaxation program. So that's how we characterize them.
That was very nice. And the first thing that impressed me was the her program, the relaxation program, the comparison. It was not a straw man. You didn't do this with giving it very little attention. And yeah, this is really just we're throwing this out there to replace the wait list control. You had a rigorous program. You had people who really knew their stuff on the relaxation doing it. So there was a level of integrity to the control group as well, which is terrific to see. You also didn't just rely on self-report measures. You took blood samples and you did other physiological measures. Tell us a little bit more about the specifics of that.
Yeah, so we took when participants first arrived at the retreat center, before they were randomized to program, we had nurses that were there at the retreat center, and everyone went through and had a blood draw at that time. And then we invited everyone back 4 months later after the retreat to the same retreat center, same time of day, and we took their blood again. So we had these blood draws that allowed us to look at these inflammatory markers, and the one that we're seeing effects is in IL-6 or interleukin-6, and this is a common marker that doctors look at because it seems to be predictive of health problems and death in older adults, particularly. This is an inflammatory marker. So I think we do have a good marker for health in these unemployed adults. But yeah, we also had this brain imaging component, so we could actually look at markers of brain activity and brain structure. And we had participants come in and do these fMRI scans in the weeks before the retreat, and then in the 2 weeks after the retreat. So after they finished this retreat, we sort of did a mad dash to get everyone into the fMRI center so that we could measure their brain change as a function of the meditation or relaxation program.
Excellent. And what your findings were consistent with other research around full 8-week MBSR programs, other mindfulness programs, that we're seeing the same kinds of changes. We're seeing the same kinds of IL-6 markers and things like that, even with a 3-day program. And that's the other aspect that I found most fascinating about this is even with it just being a concentrated 3-day program and you had a 4-month follow-up, you were still seeing noticeable, measurable effects. What was most challenging to you about developing a 3-day condensed program out of an 8-week MBSR?
Yeah, that was another reason why I like to think about this study, because we really did go out on a limb here to say, um, we can take this 8-week program and package it in a very intense format, and that people will not only do it, but they'll like it. And that came from a lot of my own contemplative practice experiences, where I've really noticed that the kind of biggest change in mindfulness for me, particularly as I kind of go about my daily life, really came from these retreat experiences, as opposed to going to a class once a week and then practicing at home on my own. The other thing that really I think mobilized this type of 3-day retreat format approach was that in our previous studies we find that in the 8-week program, a lot of people, particularly high stressed individuals, don't seem to practice. They've got so much other stuff going on in their life, challenges, that finding time to practice and do this practice that really forces them to pay attention to all the stuff that's going on inside them can be really challenging for folks. And so the retreat format gives us a highly structured environment where we can make sure that people practice. And this may have been a real key to the success of this study, because we really made sure everyone had a structured practice setting. They were doing these things, as opposed to going home after the class and then sort of hoping they'll practice. In this case, we knew they practiced. And I think that may be a real critical feature for helping high stress or at risk patient populations to really, as my mom might say, do the butt time. Get your butt on a cushion.
At the 11th Annual International Scientific Conference held by the Center for Mindfulness, and this is the same conference where you did that presentation, you also had some fascinating information about the work you're doing in stress reduction pathways, or how mindfulness practices reduces stress. Tell us about some of what you're finding there.
Yeah, it kind of harkens all the way back to my original interest with strapping on a heart rate monitor to, an experienced Zen practitioner. Because I think the most basic question that I'm chasing right now with meditation training is how does it get under the skin to influence health? Um, as a psychologist, I'm trained to really think about psychological processes or processes of the mind. And the interesting thing about meditation is that it's really almost a purely psychological process. You're not doing anything with your body, you're simply sitting there and working with your attention and your awareness. And how does that then translate into changes in your body and in long term health? And we see across a number of studies that meditation training seems to be reducing risk for relapse into depression for people who had previous major depressive episodes. We found that it seems to change HIV disease pathogenesis, so it seems to buffer disease progress in HIV. We've seen that this study seems to influence pain and pain-related conditions like fibromyalgia. So it seems to reduce these types of kind of pain pathways, including chronic pain and lower back pain. And we've also seen that mindfulness meditation training can actually help healing rates in psoriasis. Psoriasis is one of these sort of itchy, inflammatory skin conditions. And you see these really uncomfortable kind of rash-like features on the skin, and they found that meditation training seems to help clear with skin clearing rates. So why is this important? Well, if you look across all of these disease outcomes, what you commonly see is that these are all stress-related conditions: depression, psoriasis, HIV, pain, fibromyalgia. And these are all conditions where we know that stress either triggers the onset or exacerbation of these symptoms. And so if you put this together, there's sort of a really interesting pattern. It suggests, well, if these are all stress-related conditions, maybe it's stress that's the kind of underlying mechanism for these effects. Namely, that mindfulness meditation is helping people manage stress in ways that can then, buffer or even reverse these disease processes. And so that's what we've been doing. We've been really trying to test this kind of stress buffering hypothesis or resilience hypothesis, namely that mindfulness meditation training seems to have these effects on health via stress reduction pathways. And, so we've been doing in my lab brain imaging studies. We've been doing kind of stress reactivity studies in the lab. And then we've been looking at stress-related disease. So that HIV study was one that we conducted. And where we really saw the action was in the fact that I think because we recruited a high stress HIV positive population, we know that stress seems to accelerate disease progress in these HIV individuals. So I'm really kind of I think if I have to go out on a limb and say where we're going to be in 10 to 15 years in terms of understanding the science of mindfulness meditation training, that I think we're really going to see it in the case where we have diseases or conditions that are stress sensitive, and we're recruiting samples that have high levels of stress. Now, of course, we can sort of pause and say, well, most people have stress. I think that to the degree that you have even higher levels of stress, you're going to see bigger effects of mindfulness meditation training. And I think that's an important, at least in scientific language circles, we talk about this as being an important moderator of these effects. I think stress levels are an important moderator. So we've been doing these studies. We've got brain imaging studies showing that mindfulness meditation training, as I was sort of already suggesting, seems to be sort of coupling our brain with these kind of prefrontal regulatory regions of in this case, the prefrontal cortex. We also have studies showing that mindfulness and mindfulness meditation training seem to be changing our kind of central stress reactivity dynamics and kind of these more limbic areas of the brain, most notably the amygdala. And so we're seeing these changes both in kind of prefrontal downregulation pathways, as well as these kind of more fight or flight response regions of the brain, like the amygdala. And so I think we're seeing these changes in brain function and structure that then are changing how these kind of stress signals get communicated to the body. And so we're seeing changes in these kind of stress reactivity cascades, where we're seeing changes in, cortisol and, what we call the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal cortical axis, or the HPA axis. We haven't done as much with kind of our kind of fight or flight response, this kind of epinephrine or adrenaline type of response that you get. But I would also suspect that we might see changes there as well. And that changes in these kind of stress signaling dynamics in the body really may underlie why we're seeing these changes in disease outcomes in a broad range of diseases, whether it be, HIV, psoriasis, fibromyalgia, or depression.
What's your favorite published work that you've been a part of?
You work hard on these things over time, and they just kind of, I suppose there is a pride of home ownership that happens, with publishing this work. But we did a study where we looked at mindful individuals and brain response while participants were doing this affect labeling paradigm. And I can say a little bit more about that, but I think one of the reasons why I was excited about it is that this was actually the first fMRI study of mindfulness. And it was one of the first, I think, usher in a new movement by which people are thinking about mindfulness training, or at least one mechanism by which mindfulness training may influence health, is via these sort of kind of emotion regulation or regulatory kind of pathways. And so we found that more mindful individuals were able to turn on the prefrontal cortex and more effectively able to turn off these kind of limbic response areas of the brain during this affect labeling paradigm. So it was kind of the first to, I think, provide a potential mechanistic account for how mindfulness training may be kind of helping people manage their emotions and regulate their experiences more effectively. And I wasn't sure. This was 2007 that the first fMRI study came out of mindfulness. There had been some previous studies looking at structural MRI, but no functional MRI. And I wasn't sure, how this would go over. It was still felt kind of like the early days of mindfulness training science. But it was neat. I opened up, I think my Yahoo back then. I was looking at Yahoo, and they had the Yahoo Media, and there was this headline. It was like the most cited, or most clicked on headline of the week, and it said, "Brain scans reveal why meditation works." I remember thinking, "Wow, someone figured it out." And of course, so I think the media kind of exploited that a little bit too much. But nonetheless, I think there was some positive impacts with that paper in terms of ushering in, a framework for beginning to think about how mindfulness training might get under the skin to influence health.
So what are some of the things that you still have as open questions about mindfulness research? What are some things you'd like to learn more about and see happen?
I was sort of alluding to these kind of stress reactivity dynamics and bringing, mindfulness meditation into the lab to look at how people are responding to stress. One of the big questions that I'm currently facing and don't have a good answer to is if mindfulness meditation training is changing the brain and potentially changing stress biology and health, what is it that it's doing in terms of how we cope with stressors? So what is it that mindfulness meditation folks are doing under stress that helps them kind of foster this resilience? Are they coping in a different way with the stressors that they're facing, and how are they doing that? And we don't have a good answer for that right now. So we're doing some studies where we actually deliver mindfulness meditation training, and then we bring them into the lab and we basically stress them out. We make them give speeches and do difficult and we're starting to really go deep into probing changes in coping. And so I think over the next couple of years, we'll have a better answer about some of those kind of, behavioral coping changes that are taking place. And I think that'll be really important for shedding light on, what the kind of brain changes are driving forward in terms of how people are perceiving these stressors and responding to them. So I think that's a really important question. We've just scratched the surface on this retreat study format. And I think, it's a new paradigm. We need to continue to kind of, I think, shape that and test it. We initially tried a high stress patient population, or it wasn't a patient, but a community population, in this case, unemployed adults. And I'd like to begin to start testing that in other stressed, at-risk stress disease populations to see whether that's going to, be something that works for those folks, and to kind of continue to unravel the kind of cascade that's happening in terms of how it's changing the brain, changing physiology, and changing health. So I think we've just begun this process. There's so much to be done with trying to understand how this is getting under the skin to make us feel better and improve our health.
Yeah, we're very early on in the research of mindfulness, and it's a wonderful time to just observe what's going on with this field of study. Our guest today has been Dr. J. David Creswell, Assistant Professor of Psychology and Director of the Health and Human Performance Laboratory at Carnegie Mellon University. David, thanks for being with us on Present Moment.
Thanks for having me.
Today's quote is from Arnie Kozak's book, Wild Chickens and Petty Tyrants, 108 Metaphors for Mindfulness. Many people find it difficult to take care of themselves, often feeling selfish if they attend to their own needs, like trying to cut wood with a dull axe. Trying to take care of others without taking care of the self first is a counterproductive strategy. The airlines recognize this bit of wisdom. Recall how during the safety announcement, the flight attendant says, "In the event of a loss of cabin pressure, oxygen masks will drop down, and before assisting small children or others, put on your own mask first." Mindfulness practice is a part of the way we can do this, and ultimately, it is only by mindfully caring for ourselves that we can truly and effectively care for others with compassion. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the website at presentmomentmindfulness.com. You'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. You can comment on the episode page and find show notes and other helpful resources for your mindfulness practice. The shakuhachi music heard on Present Moment is used by permission and through the generosity of musician Rodrigo Rodriguez. His website is linked on the Present Moment website on the About Podcast Music page. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on Present Moment.